We have an excellent panel who can share with us all their thoughts about it. We will start with a short exposition by my colleague Scott Corwin. Scott Corwin is a senior member of the Deloitte Touche strategy and consulting business. He's leading their Future of Mobility, FOM, everything has an acronym, practice. Once he will finish, we will have our panelists, and I will present each of them when they start talking.
Happy birthday, Yoram. Thank you very much. As Yoram said, I'm Scott Corwin. I lead Deloitte's Future of Mobility practice globally. I'm based in New York. I am delighted to be back in Israel. I have just a few minutes. What I want to actually do is try to bridge the last panel, even some comments from yesterday, and this panel. And I'm going to try and do this very quickly. So what we've seen, I would argue, is wave one of this evolution revolution is the shift of tectonic plates. And it really did start with the rise of shared mobility, now the sort of symbiotic relationship between electrification and autonomy, and essentially the vertically integrated automotive industry that Yoram is part of and many others are part of is being disintermediated in pretty radical and profound ways. And we have sort of a duality between the tech players that are driving it and the legacy incumbents that are trying to react to it. That's wave one. Wave two, hopefully this works, is when we start to pull on those threads, and this was the last panel, it profoundly alters mobility in urban environments. And effectively what we have is we're moving the promise of the future of mobility at whether it's a decade from now, 5, 10, 15 years, something of that order. The promise is the following. We can move faster, safer, cleaner, cheaper, personalize the way we want, and deal with a lot of the negative externalities that exist in the existing industry today. It's an enormous promise. But the question is, and the debate, and all the innovation that we're seeing today is how do we get there? And so this picture is just a picture of a suburban commuter working their way into the city through various modes, getting to work, and then doing the opposite, going back. And what we try to do here is to begin to frame some of the underlying capabilities that are going to be needed, right? And in all the discussions that we've had in the last day or two, we've heard a lot of almost single-point solutions, incremental improvements, but there are very few people really thinking about it as a system of systems. And the question is, how do we build this ecosystem? So one point I want to make is that value, and we talk a lot about sort of, wouldn't it be great to create all this connectivity, using open APIs, creating open and free data? It would be tremendous. But the question is, there has to be underlying monetizable value. And what we're seeing in this shift to this ecosystem is a shift from the car or the vessel that we transport, a physical thing, to actually all sorts of different data and services. So at the bottom of this is infrastructure enablers. And we're not talking necessarily physical infrastructure, but we are talking about things like autonomous operating systems. And the value that underlies there is those players that develop those systems and know how we get from point A to point B and what we do along the way are going to monetize the value of that data. At the top are players that know how to curate Facebook, Apple, Amazon, others, in terms of how we spend our time. So they look at it and say there are trillions of miles that we travel, and they want to be the curator of that experience. And then in the middle is mobility management. And all the OEMs are trying to move in that space. And all the ride-hailing services are moving into that space. It is the new frontier. And the question is, will we move single-modally or will we move multimodally? And will there be a trusted mobility advisor to get us there? Behind it, and this is sort of the setup for the panel, we've peeled back, and there are multiple layers of all the different data. And we've heard about pieces of this. And we don't have time to go through them, but the point is, ultimately, for us to realize all of the benefits, we actually have to have an integrated system that begins to bring this together. And so, one of my words of advice for everyone here that participates in this ecosystem is to begin to think about where your solution, your business, your approach, sort of where to play and how to win in the context of all of this. And then the last bit, which the last panel got to, which I think is this is the third wave, if you will, and that is that urbanization and increased population, was mentioned in the last panel. We're going to double the population of urban centers from 3 billion people to 6 billion people by 2050. Cities are struggling to keep up with that growth. The vibrancy and economic development, it is an imperative. We manage mobility in a single mode, and we optimize them that way. And so there is no possibility that we're going to build systems fast enough, transportation systems fast enough to keep pace with that. So there is a need to figure out how do we optimize and sort of re-equilibrate supply and demand. And we believe that the next frontier in this whole thing, which will be very data-centric, is to begin to figure out how do we re-equilibrate supply and demand. And we could easily imagine that we will take friction out of the system and create greater transparency where we want all this mobility innovation. It's really good, it's really valuable, but it's adding to the problem. And on the other side, we have massive advances in cognitive science and behavioral economics, and we can create nudges and begin to shape behavior. They talked about monetization. Ultimately, a platform like this could help with the fact that cities are starving for funds. They're going to see a decline in revenues tied to the automobile, and they're going to need to replace that. So we have to think about this conversation in the context of how do we monetize the value, not just for the private sector, but for the public sector. And I want to turn back to the panel, but I thought this would be a good way to frame the discussion.
Thank you very much. It's not the way we are seated, and to show you we are dynamic, we had our time here shortened, so we will try to keep our answers short, so we will have at least 2 rounds if we are able. Avner Cohen is the president and co-founder of Autonomo, an Israeli maverick startup dedicated to enabling the onset of the connected car ecosystem. And I wanted to ask Avner whether the combat to utilize big data, which is now shrouded with a lot of doubts, can really be won by making it a tangible monetization, which also Scott mentioned. And is the game, at the end of the day, monetization, or are there more than the eye can meet regarding this big data, which is such a treasure, the new oil of the new era?
Oh, thanks. So I'll start with a short introduction. Ben and I founded the company 2 years ago. We raised money from Bessemer and Stage 1, 2 leading investors in Israel, and Maniv, one of the leading automotive investors in Israel. And in the last round, we had Delphi, Dell, and Hearst joining with significant investment. Autonomo creates a marketplace for car data. So cars that are sold today are likely to be connected, and when we say that they are connected, there are dozens or even hundreds of parameters that are sent by the car, starting from technical parameters like engine state, and then location, speed, acceleration, brakes, fuel level, and many other parameters that are sent every minute, sometimes every second. So imagine dozens of millions and later hundreds of millions of cars sending a lot of data to the cloud. And at the same time, there are so many companies that are looking for that data, whether it's insurance companies, energy companies, parking services, and small startups that are looking for the car data. And Autonomo is the marketplace that connects the two. So as a marketplace, we do the business connectivity. If you are a startup in Palo Alto or in Tel Aviv, and you're interested in data in Munich, then you don't have to go to all the manufacturers. You simply connect to Autonomo. We will tell you how many cars, the types of cars that are available, and we will tell you how much you will have to pay. We will tailor the package to your needs if you are an insurance company or parking service or others. And at the same time, so we go to the car manufacturers and we tell them that there are plenty of applications that are willing to serve their drivers. And that's the basis for the monetization that you asked me about. So we go to these manufacturers, we're telling them your location information is of interest for parking services. And the fuel level is of interest for energy companies. And even your reverse camera is of interest for other companies. Let's create bundles out of them. Let's share them with applications and services. We will help you do that. And together with both sides as a marketplace, there is a demand side and supply side. We help the two converge with an idea of how much money can be provided by the demand side to the supply side for the data that they are providing. So there is no clear answer about the value of data. And moreover, it's not only about the monetization of data, we are enriching the driving experience that the drivers feel.
Thank you. I will ask now Avner Cohen, who is the president and CEO and co-founder of Autonomo, an Israeli Maverick startup dedicated to to Igal. I made a mistake. Igal Reichelgaz, who is the CEO and founder of Cortica, an Israeli startup founded in 2007 that is giving machines the gift of sights. And what we wanted to ask you actually is the artificial intelligence which you are versed in. Is it going to change the landscape as profoundly as it is being anticipated by the optimists, you being on the part of the optimists? And is artificial intelligence really up to the task at its current stage, or are there still further grounds that need to be conquered?
Sure. So first, a short introduction about Cortica.
Yeah,
Cortica.
we don't hear you well. You think you need to raise your voice a bit.
So short introduction about Cortica. Cortica is an AI company that was founded about a decade ago based on the research at the Technion, trying to merge two disciplines. One is machine learning, and the other one is a computational neuroscience. And at the time, we envisioned that there will be a major shift in terms of various platforms to autonomy, and there will be a need for a more advanced AI that goes beyond supervised learning and being based on annotated data. The company was focused over the years in various markets, including smartphone markets. Recently, we shifted to automotive market and other applications where autonomous capabilities are extremely important. So to your question, I think if we look at autonomous platforms, they push the envelope of artificial intelligence further. There are additional requirements, including unsupervised learning, including the ability to understand what happens within the system and not being just a black box that produces the results, and as well including the ability to share data in a compressed form so the big data that is produced can make its way to the cloud, to other cars, and so on. So in Cortica, we solve this problem by a bit different approach that is indeed based on how our brain works, the cortex. That's how the name Cortica comes from. And we are taking the data that is generated on the edge by cars, for example, and we are compressing this data for the purpose of recognition and analysis later on. So we are not losing the information. However, the compression is unique. It's not for the purpose of reconstructing the images or any other sensory data, but more for the purpose of building the environmental model and allowing the cars to perform. I think another interesting aspect of this, if we have an experience in the smartphone market, and as a frame of reference, and you mentioned it in your opening, if we compare the two areas of big data, the smartphone and the mobility, we can just look closer at the numbers, and we know that we as regular users produce about 1,000 images a day, which make most of the data on the web today. Compared to that, if we take a car produces about 1 million images, even if we just take one camera with relatively low usage rate, relatively low frame rate. So we are talking about orders and orders, about 4 orders of magnitude in terms of how much the big data is bigger in automotive compared to the web or mobile area. And of course, this will push the envelope of artificial intelligence that is required to make the promise of autonomous vehicles.
Thank you, Igal. I will now ask Daisy Kaiway, and maybe she will also refer to what both Avner and Igal said. Daisy is a partner at Baidu Ventures, and she's managing Baidu's 200 million venture capital fund. Baidu focus on early-stage technology companies globally, and you as a representative of the investor community, which none of the other panel members are part of that family. Is there not what I tried to ask about the wheelbarrows, is there not an exaggeration? So we hear what Igal is saying, that there will be 1 million images from a car, but Is it so interesting to have all this mega information being analyzed by these advanced AI algorithms, where at the end of the day, how do you make money out of it and what is the return? Why there can be endless knowledge, but not all of it is important? Why is it important, and where do you think you should put your investors' dollars in?
That's a very good question. Maybe I'll also take a couple minutes to introduce ourselves. For those who don't know Baidu well, Baidu is one of the leading internet company in China. So Baidu has thousands of engineers working on artificial intelligence and autonomous driving and providing connected services through partnerships, empower the car OEMs and tier 1 suppliers. Baidu has been having frequent relationship with Israel since 2014. Last year, when Mr. Prime Minister visited China, he visited, had a discussion with Baidu CEO Robin. So our investment team have been coming to Israel periodically in the past few years. Baidu's investment team have invested a few startups like Taboola, Dynamic Yield, and some local venture capital funds. Back to your question about data, and this is definitely the buzzwords. And data varies. Let's categorize data. It's a variety of data with more public data like the road environment, car data, car usage or location, or the more intimate data about the car owners, like how you use the car, where you drive every day, and how you spend your time in the car, like what you look for information, what do you watch for entertainment, all sorts. And if you go one step further, your payment, your communication, your email, social media, everything you do. So when all these data collected together and related to people's identity, it become a very useful. It can profile your life. Basically, you can do a lot of personalization with these data. You can have personalized insurance. You can have personalized medicine, personalized everything, like shopping, everything. So these data, we call it user profiling. These are very high quality data around a user. In terms of how to monetize the data, I think in the autonomous industry, the incumbents and the new entrants have different specialties. Like the tech giants, new entrants, like companies like Google or Baidu, have operating systems, and you can gather a lot of data. Like Baidu has a voice virtual assistant in the car called DuerOS. This makes the interaction so simple. So the driver or people sitting in the car can interact and give instructions, make the data collecting easier. So these will further boost the data generation and analytics. And of course, the next biggest topic will be how to use the AI to analyze those data on a real-time basis. And all these data are unstructured, so how to analyze these data real-time and fast. So those are the next big things.
Thank you. Last for this round is Yarmila Placha. She is a friend, a partner of us at Champion Motor in our local initiative to scout relationship and find startups and companies that will contribute to Skoda's effort to become more competitive and adapt to the new era. And Yarmila is the head of the DigiLab of Skoda in Prague, that is the spearhead to develop new technology, and I guess her main target is to make sure Skoda remains simply clever. So Yarmila, you are the only one here coming from the OEMs. They are all the barbarians at the gate. Tesla selling less than 25,000 cars a quarter is worth much more than General Motors that sells 2.3 million cars a year. And there is a feeling that the OEMs are on the defensive. Knowing you, I know you are on the offensive. How is the offensive look like, and what big data will do in an age where the car is merely a computer on wheel, or at least that's what I'm being told.
Yoram, thanks a lot for a great introduction, and once again, happy birthday also on my behalf. It's great to be here. I would like to introduce shortly, not Škoda Auto, because I hope that you see the success of Škoda in Israel. We have been here for many years as physically present throughout the fleet of our cars. And if I'm not mistaken, only last year we sold 20,000 cars in Israel. What I wanted to say is that the inventiveness is part of DNA of Škoda. And if you look at the history of Škoda, it started as a humble startup in 1895. Unfortunately, we do not have hundreds of years to cope with the latest trends. When Škoda Auto started, it started as a bike producer. So two guys in 1895 got together, and one of them has purchased a German-made bike. And the bike got broken, and he sent to the producer a letter in Czech and complaining the bike got broken. And the producer's answer was, make sure you write us in the proper language when you want to complain. So the guy got motivated. He got, with this obstacle, he got motivated. And with the guy, one was Václav Klement, and the other guy was another Václav, Laurin. And they started a bike company. 4 years later, as their business developed, they were already producing motorbikes. And in 1905, they started to sell first cars. What I'm saying is the inventiveness is part of DNA of all OEMs. All automotive producers have been developing their hardware. Unfortunately, the current trends and technologies do not give us so much time to do the step-by-step development. And that's why I'm a great believer that in order to move further, to be sort of partners with the new trends, we have to create absolutely new ways of collaboration and create new ways of partnerships. This is my 5th time in Israel within the last 6 months. I was here only for the first time in April. And I told to my bosses, guys, if we do want to move in innovation and bring the latest innovations back to us, back to the company, we need to be in Israel. So from April till this month, till October, we've already established a partnership not only with Champion Motors, but we are talking to companies like Autonomo. We have 12 companies from the ecosystem in the pipeline. And what I want to say is, in order to achieve and to be successful in the next 120 years, which Škoda has behind in the history, you need to bet on partnerships. And me, as a newcomer to automotive industry, I strongly believe that big data is a new big engine for automotive industry. I was listening carefully yesterday another panel discussion, and one of the guys said, until now, automotive industry was 90% about hardware and 10% about software and data. And just now we are strongly seeing the trend moving it the other direction. And I'm a great believer that with the partners, with partnership with guys like Autonomo, we can get there much faster. Because the big data and data from cars are a big pool not only for additional revenue stream, but a big opportunity to give our customers another service. Because if you, we talked about the data which can be generated from the car. So just imagine, Škoda already produces fully connected car. We started last year with the first model Kodiaq. I know that there are not as many Kodiaqs in the street because we are underwater with the production limit. Everyone wants Kodiaq. Kodiaq is the first fully connected car. And you can, through Škoda Connect, you can see the status of your car, how much fuel you have, where is your car located, etc., etc. But this is only the humble beginning, because we are working heavily and investing a lot of resources into building an ID of the car, ID of the passenger, and then we will shift to the next stage, how to monetize additional data. Data from all the sensors, data from all the assistants which our car collect. And here, I have to honestly say, we are at the very beginning. Because especially in Europe, not only in the Czech Republic, but the European Union is bringing a new legislation. Most of you heard about GDPR coming into reality on the 25th of 2018, and it will bring a lot of challenges. But you can look at the glass of the water and you say, is it half full? Is it opportunity or is it threat? And I'm a great believer that GDPR for automotive industry is an opportunity because it will give to everyone clear rules how to behave. It gives customers the clear rules and awareness what his data are worth and how to protect himself or herself. But at the same time, it will build a trust. It will build a trust about the data owner and the data processor. So what I wanted to say is we are at the very beginning from the automotive car producer point of view, how to handle big data. But I'm an optimist. I believe it's a new era for automotive industry. And if we do it right, we can give another set of services, set of products based on big data to our customers. Because whatever we do, we just want to make our customer happy, whether he is an owner of Skoda or owner of another brand.
Well, we all want to be happy, that's sure. Thank you for the optimistic remarks. With time running, I think I will ask maybe Scott as the advisor in the group to make a synthesis. We have here two people sitting in the wheel of a startup. We have one lady sitting on the wheel of an investment fund, and we have one lady here sitting at the wheel of the digital lab of Skoda. And my question to you would be, if and when we celebrate with such pomp, with such great flair my birthday 20 years from now when I am probably 39, how would you see the landscape of the automotive industry? Will indeed data become such an important element of it? What will be the role of the OEMs? What will be the role of those artificial intelligence that will teach each other how to do the job? And try and answer your Miller question. When we see a glass half empty, half full, everybody says, well, you need to look at the half full, you need to look at the half empty. And I always say, you need to look at the glass. It's half empty, half full. What will happen with it, we need to discuss. Please.
I appreciate the hard question at the end. So I do think we're at a really interesting transition point. And in our work, when we really first started, when you look at sort of the extended automotive industry, and it's not just suppliers and OEMs and retailers, but it's the energy companies, it's actually the tech players, it's actually the public sector, which generates significant revenues from the cars. What you have is a system where it's basically, as you said in your opening remarks, fundamentally hadn't changed since the time of Henry Ford. And it's been hit with sort of this tsunami in terms of the fundamental dynamics of competition are changing. And I do think we're at a point, and I've spent a lot of time with a lot of OEMs, where at first they were really very much trying to control the pace and the timing of change. I think they've come around to the reality that shared mobility is going to increase, and ultimately means that, you know, you'd have actually fewer cars on the road. We're going to have different forms of mobility, so we will continue to have driver-driven vehicles. For a while, we will have the rise of shared that's driver-driven. Eventually, we will also have shared autonomous vehicles, most likely in cities, and then we will have personally owned autonomous vehicles. And guess what? In most geographies, we're going to have all four. Maybe eventually the driver shared system will get cannibalized. But that wreaks utter havoc on the business model of the entire value chain. So, like anything, disruption is not a friend of legacy incumbents, and it's either adapt or die. And that is the hard reality. And what we're seeing now is this unbelievable movement where the tech players and the OEMs and the entire value chain are starting to come together But make no mistake, as an outside observer, I would say there will be winners and losers. And this is a race. And it's sort of, the question is timing. And it's really a question of what does the future look like? Where will these entities play? How will they win? There is a bit of an assumption on the legacy side. Because they're so big, because they're so capital intensive, they assume that they have the capabilities to do the three things I talked about, but they don't necessarily have the capabilities. And the digital players and the tech players actually don't have the capabilities to build the entire business. So at some point they will come together and we will see that integration. It'll probably play out regionally at first, and then it'll start to go global. So I don't know if that's the answer we're looking for, but that is sort of our kind of perspective on all of this.
Yeah, I guess none of us, fortunately or unfortunately, has a crystal ball that he can say where it will end and how it will unfold, but certainly we are seeing such a paradigm shift that involves really the very foundations of our society. It's not a new mode of transformation and transportation. It's really infrastructure, government regulation, sources of energy, and we can always hope and remind ourselves that usually such big changes were in our human history coupled with violence and wars, and so far so good. This is a battle that is fought without soldiers, without casualty. It's only a lot of dreams, a lot of disappointments, winners, losers, but no casualties, and that's something that should be cherished. Clearly, there is a need here for a multi-effort. It's not one OEM who will take the prize. All those startups, despite their ingenuity and cleverness, won't change the world alone. There is a sense that it's a huge human effort. And my question maybe last to Daisy as an investor would be, do you see a role for governments or for OEMs cooperating or for companies? How do you do it? They say there was, Adam Smith denominated the invisible hand. Now they talk about the digital invisible hand, which is very visible. It knows everything about it. Do you have any thought of how do you cooperate among all the various players that there is a better chance of doing an effective change in a shorter time?
That's $1 million question. But I think it helps to understand everyone's rationale to how they use data and what they need the data for, so that government or regulatory body can come up with the right rules for everyone to play. So for example, the OEMs, you use the data to understand customers' behavior, right? You want to know how the customers every day use the car, and also how they make their repair and maintenance choices. So you can have dealers and customers have better relationships. So from OEM's point, these are the purposes why they need data, why they want to use analytics. For tier ones also, tier ones want to serve their B2B customers better, so they want to collect more data analytics, and they want to reach to their final customers, so they can provide more services. And for a new entrants, like the internet people, want to better provide the connectivity services. And you know, for the car sharing that Scott mentioned, car sharing is another big party. They already use the data very wisely. So they're the better group right now, uses the data to allocate their fleet management.
The Ubers of the world.
Yeah. So different parties playing in this value chain, and everybody has purposes. But I think that, as you mentioned earlier, transparency is the most important. You have to let your customer know upfront how you're going to, analyze the data and what the data you're going to collect and use. So, and for the partnerships, how the world will evolve, and in this whole competition, I would not say it's a competition. I think there's a better word, co-opetition. There will be various partnerships. So as we mentioned earlier, like all these tech giants partner with OEMs, like Google partner with Chrysler. Also, tech giants partner with the mobility provider. Google also partner with Lyft. And the startups also, the tier ones buying the startups and OEMs buying the startups. Even like incumbents like Ford or GM, the very old, from 100 years ago, Ford invented the first revolution in auto industry in 1908, right? So the first batch of mass manufacturing was invented by Ford. So even the Ford likes of company are trying so hard to reinvent themselves, to spend $1 billion invest in Argo AI, and also the GM also invest in Lyft, invest in cruise automation. All these are big efforts that incumbents trying so hard to stay relevant. So I think the co-opetition will be a better word to describe the evolving dynamics. You don't know what partnership works out. Some might work, some might not work. Like Google tried Uber first and then didn't work quite so well, then Lyft, they're very dynamic. And the M&A world is so active. So I think overall, people will choose different strategies. Like in the incumbent space, like Waymo or Tesla choose to do it in a quite closed system, versus Baidu has an open source system called Apollo, trying to partner with the OEMs. So people are, different players are trying different ways to play it. So I don't think anybody has a crystal ball to answer this big question, but everyone apparently is trying very hard.
Thank you. Last and not least, we are already in the red. We are running out of time. Yamila, you wanted to comment on the co-opetition, so please.
I just wanted to say that it's great to see some positive trends, because it's not only about collaboration and cooperation within the groups. Of course, we at Škoda are very actively working with other brands within Volkswagen Group, and we are building things together and testing things together. But what I'm really enthusiastic about is to see the collaboration activities across the brands, across different competitors. As an example, I would just mention a platform called Here, where competitors Audi, BMW, and Daimler got together to build some platform. Another great example is the Connected Car Coalition, which is also developing some joint standards. So what I'm saying is these new trends enabled different players and different competitors, even from within the industry, to get together. And I really like this trend that the collaboration is across the former sort of borders of you are a friend and you are my competitor. So collaboration is not only within the ecosystem of startups, not only within automotive and tech companies, but also across the overall industry, which I believe is a great positive trend. Thank you.
Thank you. So friends and competitors are changing. You wanted to say something?
Yes,
I see you all the mic. Yes,
I had another comment. So we see the regulators and regulations as accelerators in this space in at least two areas. One is to promote openness of data that Scott mentioned. For example, the EU regulators are pushing toward use of data from cars in a more open way. And once that happens, there will be more and more applications and community and mobility services that will consume the data. And secondly, they are driving new regulations for the use of the data, the way that the data can be shared. And once people would feel that the regulator takes care of their privacy, they will be willing to share more and more data. So we see the regulators like ACEA in Europe. We work with VW Group and other companies to drive new car platforms. So we see these regulators as accelerators, and I believe that they will help us share more data and use more applications in the future.
Thank you very much.